Enough? Keep going, okay.
Folks, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show, and we're joined here in Petaluma by a phenomenal drummer and one of the original recording engineers at Fantasy Records, Jim Stern. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Happy to be here.
You know, you told me in our initial radio interview that Dennis Whitted, he was the original drummer at Fantasy Records?
He was the staff drummer, and I had been in Big Sur after the band that I had put together with Danny Healy, the Hoppin' Spice, or later the Bicycle.
The Bicycle.
I left and went to Big Sur for a year, and when I came back, I was living in my car, believe it or not, and I ran into Dennis. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "What's going on?" I said, "I'm living in my car. I'm looking for work." He said, "Hey, man, I'm leaving to join the Paul Butterfield Better Days Band. I'm supposed to replace myself at Fantasy. Here's the R&B producer's name and phone number. Call him." And that was Ray Shanklin. So I called him, and he said, "Come on over," and I played on the tune for free, and I was tearing the drums down, and Ray came in and said, "What are you doing, boy?" I said, "I'm taking the drums." He said, "Don't you touch them drums." I said, "Okay." And that was it, and I was the staff drummer, and I was helping him make records, because my degrees are in electronics, and I knew audio, and I knew what was going on. God gave me ears. I didn't develop ears.
God gave me ears.
That was it, I just...
No, but here's the thing. Whitted came up to you and said...
No, we just ran some...
You did, but he knew you were already a player, though.
Yes, he did.
How did he know that?
Because in those days, we were all hanging out together around the Bay Area. The Fillmore had opened, and, I remember when the first time Cream came, and there's backstages, all the drummers are standing back there, and he and I, and... I'm trying to think, there's a couple others, the names aren't coming to me. Mickey Hart was there and some other people. And places like the Jukebox on Haight Street or the Jazz Levels, you'd run into these guys from time to time.
The Jazz Levels. The Haight Street, that was...
There was a place called the Jukebox, Juke,
yeah.
And the other was called the Haight Levels or the Jazz Levels. I think it was the Haight Levels. They were just down the block.
Grinelli was telling me about that.
And, they all knew me as... I was kind of a rock drummer. I wasn't really into jazz and all that. But I played some R&B, and when I got to Fantasy, that's all I played was on the R&B stuff. I played on Lenny Williams. Remember Lenny from Tower of Power? No, I played on his first 45s before he went with Larry Graham and all those guys. And, so I played on Alice Stewart's first album. That was a rock album. Full-Time Woman, I think, was...
Absolutely.
And,
no, what I'm trying to get at is the idea of, like, when you joined Fantasy, were they still in San Francisco?
No, they were in Oakland.
They were in Oakland at that point.
Fantasy was never in San Francisco. It was Circle Records. When it was in San Francisco, it was owned by the Weiss brothers, Max and Saul Weiss. And Saul Zantz was the sales manager. And he got together a group of limited partners and bought the company, changed the name to Fantasy Records, and moved it over to Oakland, West Oakland, 30th and Peralta. They would drive by and machine gun the front of the building. They'd bust in and steal the typewriters.
It was a small place. It was small.
It was out in the middle of nowhere, and funky part of Oakland for sure. And then Creedence made all that money, and we built the new facility, and that's when I started building and designing studios.
Because I was talking to Merle Saunders' son, Merle Saunders Jr.
I just ran him the other night.
Merle Saunders Jr.
So I'm at the party for Studio D, had their little holiday party. So my buddy Morty Wiggins, do you know Morty?
No.
He was Bill Graham's vice president, and he was general manager of A&M. We're close friends. Anyway, I'll go with you. So he's talking to this black guy, and I walk over, and he's, "Oh, do you know each other, Jim Stern, Merle Sanders, dude?" And Merle's like this big now. Well, I've known Merle since he was a baby. They were little kids when Merle Senior and I were good friends. I couldn't believe. I thought he was going to squeeze me to death.
Well, no, because he told me that Fogerty worked in the mailroom at Circle Records.
Yes.
And then he worked at the one in Oakland, I believe, as well.
Yes.
So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about how much Shanklin, what kind of freedom he gave you as an engineer, and ultimately your philosophy as it related to the technology of the time and how you mic'd the drum kit at that time?
Okay, let me explain what the studio was at Fantasy. I have a picture of it. I'll show you later.
Yeah.
It was just a room in a warehouse, and we built a little wall to separate the warehouse from the studio part. We had some microphones, and we had these combined boxes, so you could plug 2 mics in and have one go into the. And we had no board. We had a Scully 8-track.
You had no board.
No board. Scully 8-track. You plugged mics right into the 8-track, and if you needed 2 mics to go together, we had these little combined boxes that we made, and that was it. And we couldn't mix, so we had to go to Hyder to mix. Because we couldn't have a board or anything. And that was how it started. And it was like that for a while. And anything that really was complicated, really needed stuff, we had to go outside. We'd go to Hyder's or somewhere like that.
Can you talk about, like, the Lenny Williams session is the only one documented, but what are some of the sessions that you needed to go and get triage outside of the Peralta facility?
I think we mixed the Alice Stewart album for sure, I think, at Hyder's. I'd have to check the album to make sure that was what it was. And the Lenny thing, I think, was mixed also there. Several of the others, I don't always know because I play, as a musician, you're done and they're gone. And then the record comes out and you find out what happened because you don't know. It's the same thing as an engineer or producer. Once you hand it into the record label, you're done. And whatever they do with it has its life of its own. So we just sort of have to move on from there. But it wasn't too much longer. It was 70, I think 69 or 70 we started building, and we moved in, I think, in 71. And I opened Studio A first, and got Frank DiMedio to come and build custom boards.
The one in Berkeley you're talking about.
Yeah, and that was basically MCI, not MCI, API equipment inside a custom console that we had designed.
Who was the cat that built it all?
Frank DiMedio. Frank was chief engineer at Radio Cuba. And when Castro took over, they got out of there. He flew his own plane out of there and flew his family out of there. But he got out of there with nothing. And a very, very smart man. Very, very smart. He built a lot of studios. And a lot of, not studios, what do you call it? Consoles.
Right.
So I built Studio A first, then Studio B, which was the little one, then Studio C, and then the last one was Studio D, which was a whole other thing. Studio D took 3.5 years out of my life. It was a complete concept and a whole complex built specifically for recording.
Can you talk about the concept? I think this is fascinating.
Yeah, okay, so we were in West Berkeley, and there down the street was the railroad spur. And they would shake the ground, you could hear it, there were all this industrial stuff. So we put a footing down, which was, I don't remember the size of it, but it was a large footing. In a what do you call it? A square footing of the building. On top of that was an 8-inch concrete shell all the way to the top. Huge. I mean, it's like, I don't know, 5 stories, whatever it is. And then inside of that, floated from those footings, was another footing. And on top of that was a 4-inch concrete wall shell. So there's a shell within a shell, which I then filled up with styrofoam beads, these little teeny beads. There must have been a gazillion of them. I don't know. We pumped them in forever. That whole space between them, all the way up on all 4 sides, was filled with these beads. Now everything is separated. So when we go to build the studio, I had 3 12-inch slabs floated from the outside walls and floated from each other. On top of that, floated completely on top of that, were 10-inch slabs, floated from each other and floated from the walls. One for the drum booth, one for the string area, one for the control room, one for everything. Had its own slab. And then we built the wooden walls, with wooden studs and all that, on top of those individual slabs. So the control room was a room sitting on its own slab all by itself, separated from everything else. So there was no transfer of energy. When we were putting in a stake into the drum area, so we could put a little door on the front of it, and you could put your foot on the drum slab and the other foot on the other slab, and while they were jackhammering it in, you couldn't feel it on the other foot. It was that separated. So it's this great room. It was voted, I believe, the #1 studio on the planet in 2000. So when the partners sold the record label to Concord, they didn't sell the building or the complex, and Concord leased back the studios. But when they sold the building to Warren Real Estate Development, Concord left. They didn't re-sign a lease, And so the studios were vacant. And then I got a call from Jeffrey Wood. He said, hey, Warren is opening the studio. He wants us to open, and we're opening, and blah, blah, blah. So I went over, and I showed him what was going on. And we figured at that time, because they were talking about originally taking the studios out, and I figured it would cost 150 maybe thousand to take that room out, because it's so complicated what's in there. Huge halon system for fire and all that. So here just recently, Warren wanted to sell the building, and they were concerned that having recording studios dedicated in that space would prevent them from having a wide variety of places to market it. So they spun that it wasn't profitable and blah, blah, blah. They were booked all the way through the end of the year. They made them close. So they closed it. In fact, my buddy, do you know Dick Conti?
Sure.
Okay, so Dick's a good friend. He plays in our bebop group on Monday nights a lot. And he just gave me his new album. He cut his one of the last albums cut there just before they closed on the piano that I bought for Bill Evans and McCoy Tyner, the 9-foot Yamaha. Yamaha had spent 2 years finding that piano for me. They finally called me and said, hey, we got the piano. Because, Bill played like this and McCoy played like that. So it was but what a piano. I'm going to keep tracing that piano. I want to go.
People want to see you. Can you play a little bit more? People want to see you play.
Oh, I'm not that great of an individual player, man. I'm more of a groove guy.
Yeah, play your groove.
Oh my God, what groove? Okay, what do you want? I got to think of something that in my head, a musical thing.
Well, no, what I'm thinking about is like when you used to have to do the overdubs of the Al Jackson, the stuff that you had to go.
Oh yeah. Well, with that they would only let me play one. So I had to go like this because I'm just replacing the bass drum, or I would have to do something like. That kind of stuff, because you couldn't play. Play that kind of thing because they already had that and they wanted to keep that. They just wanted the other.
They wanted to keep the top of the kit and they wanted the bass drum.
Each tune was kind of different, just trying to bring all the sound up to being something more modern. But let's see.
I love it, dude. You're cooking, man.
It takes a while for me to get loosened up, but
this is so interesting. You sort of are one of the elder statesmen of the Bay Area. I mean, you talk about East 14th, the library,
the library. Yeah.
These clubs. There. I mean, what was the vibe? Was this like? Can you just talk about that vibe? Because the clubs I'm more familiar with are obviously the Workshop and
right.
Places that were in the Fillmore district when Charles Sullivan was still running the district before Bill Graham took over. But
right.
So what was the vibe like? It was a bohemian style kind of place?
Well, it depended on what club. If it was East 14th Street, it was R&B. It was, what do you call it? I'm trying to remember what, there was 2 or 3 clubs out there. It was mostly in the black world. It wasn't. There was like Ruthie's Inn on San Pablo, the 10th Street Inn on Gilman in Berkeley. And so I was playing with like J.J. Malone, and he was R&B. For some reason I got that. And Billy Joe Beacoat and Roger.
Billy Joe Beacoat. I mean, these are names I'm not even familiar with.
They were just East Bay guys. I played on a bunch of young East Bay. Doo-wop groups that Ray Shanklin was producing. And Roger Collins, he had Foxy Little Girl from Oakland or something. I played on some of his stuff. So these guys, they would play this Chitlin circuit, and I had a reputation of being a token whitey. I was the white boy that could play in the band, and if they wanted to play mixed clubs, they had to have a white boy in the band. And so I played a lot of these clubs. It was I had a big fro, and I could fit in, and I played the music and had a good time, and it was pretty good. The only place that was tough was Ruthie's Inn.
Why?
Do you know who Johnny Guitar Watson was?
Oh,
okay.
my man.
When Johnny came back out of Pimpton, I did his first 5 albums or something. And he played Ruthie's, and he said, you got to come to the gig, maybe sit in, whatever. So I'm in the back, and these guys were surrounding me, and they were like, what's this white boy doing in here? And this was not the time of, back in those days, you just didn't do that.
Right.
And I thought, oh, God, what am I going to do? And Johnny stopped the band. He said, hey, he's with me. And that they all backed away. Nobody was friendly. Nobody came up to him or buy a drink or something. They just backed away from me, and I was okay. If he hadn't done that, I was headed for the door. But there were a lot of those places like that there were 2 circuits. There was I hate to put it this way, but there's the white circuit and the black circuit.
Absolutely.
So the black circuit was the Chitlin circuit, running mostly in the East Bay, a few in San Francisco and all. And then there was 3 actually. There was the jazz. There was Jacks of Sutter. There was the Bothan. There was Jimbo's Bop City. There were all these places where the jazz music would.
The Red Balloon. Ed Kelly used to play that.
Yes, and then there were all these places like the Library and Zach's and all that were just rock and roll dance. So Friday night and Saturday nights, everybody go out and get drunk and dance their butts off and go home with somebody, hopefully. And that was the whole scene.
And you were playing top 40, basically?
I was playing top 40 and R&B, mostly just all that kind of stuff. I wasn't playing jazz. I didn't play jazz until maybe 25 years ago.
Right.
A friend of mine, there was this bebop rehearsal band here in town, and they don't play gigs, it's all just Monday night by ourselves, just for us. You can make a mistake, nobody cares. And so I said, well, I'm not a jazz drummer, well, we don't have a drummer, lost our drummer. I said, okay, I'll keep time for you till you get, a drummer. And they said, okay, great. And here's what I did for 2 years. 4, no, yes. That's all I would do. I had no chops and I wasn't going to try. 25 years later, I can play a bit now. I'm practicing more and playing more, and I'm playing some gigs out now. So, from that standpoint, that's when I started playing jazz. The thing that helped me was I know the music. I know I either recorded them or have been listening to them for all this time. And, these are the albums I've done. Not all of them, that's all I've got right now. But most of this is jazz,
and it's all just very. You told me the great story about Jerry Hahn's group with Marsh and Mel Graves, and they're playing outside, and you said we're not gonna be able to sell records this way. We got to find. And then Merle was walking in the hallway. You grabbed him and brought him in to play organ because he couldn't play outside on his best day.
We played Joyce Spring, I think Opera Vive.
All blues.
All blues. He could play tunes. So instead of playing this crazy outside jazz, just a jam session, we're playing tunes.
I want a guy who's just tuning in is. When did you start using Mike Clark on sessions? He was doing a lot of the Charlie Brown stuff,
Yes.
a lot of the Giraldi stuff. But I'm just like, I feel like because it's sort of a 2-part question. I mean, you were you had too much work to do as an engineer, so you had to stop drumming.
Yeah.
And I wonder how painful a decision that was for you. Not really?
I was going to do it for a year. Okay, I'll just do this for a year. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. And all of a sudden, I got people like Woody Herman saying, you're the man. I got McCoy Tyner, you're the man. I got, suddenly here's
Gary Bartz.
Oh God, I love Gary Bartz.
He's tuning in, yeah.
I did a bunch with him. And, here's Cannonball standing in front of my office. And it's like all of a sudden I'm right in the middle of all this stuff. And I got so involved in all of the production and the music and the recording. And at the same time, I'm building studios. I'm training staff. I'm buying equipment. I was doing all of it. I was 14 hours a day forever. But if you love what you do, it's not work.
I did.
And I just couldn't get enough of it, I guess. And I was just I don't think, this was probably done, I don't know, maybe, a lot of this was done probably in the 10-year period. Who can do that much work anymore? There's not enough for one person to do all of this anymore. It's spread out over a lot of people and a lot of studios all over. But in those days, there weren't a lot. And there weren't a lot of independent studios with engineers. That started happening, all of it started changing when studios were losing money. They couldn't keep the doors open. They became a recording school. Suddenly, all these people are learning recording, and now everybody's got a Macintosh and they're recording just like this in a room like this. I mean, I've made records in here. I made 3 or 4 records in here that were good records, sounded great, because you can do it now. In that little Mac that I have in the center drawer in my desk there, that's all plugged into everything, that Mac has more in it than all the equipment I had at Fantasy in one studio. You know, it's all in a little box now, and if you know how to use it, it's great.
Do you feel like there's a homogenization of sound as it relates to recording, in the sense that what you're talking about is studios began to shut their doors and they became more of an academy? So then there was templates and books and literature, and then it's the same thing with music today, where you have cats. Bart's told me this. You got whose teacher they were because the student sounds exactly the same as the teacher.
Exactly.
We were talking about Van Gelder off air. Did engineers have their own techniques before, and has it become more homogenized as it relates to that?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. We didn't know how to do things.
Exactly.
There were no equipment
We're
to
making
do
it up.
We made it up. I said to, do you know who Roy Halley was? Okay, so I don't know if he's still with us?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. God bless you if you are, and God bless you if you're not. So I said to Roy, bridge over troubled water. He said, yeah. I said, okay, the T in troubled. Like a bridge over rubble. The T went to Mars. I said, how did you get that delay? He said, well, I took a tape. We used to use tape delay. You'd record on the record head and take it off. The play head was a little delay. He said, I ran it through a machine. Then I went over to Studio B and ran it through their machine. Then I took it over to the others, then I ran it back through. He ran it through 3 or 4 machines to get that long enough delay. I said, how did you get that reverb? He says, well, I put Hal Blaine on the, I don't know what floor, say 8th floor, and I had them put the elevator all the way to the bottom, put a mic at the top floor and a mic at the bottom floor, and mic'd the elevator shaft with him. I said, we had to make that stuff up because I needed a stereo chamber, and I didn't have a really separate stereo chamber. I had stereo chambers, but it was homogeneous, one room. So at Fantasy, in the lounge, there was a door that went into a little hallway, and the door on the right was the men's room, the door on the left was the women's. So I blocked it off, closed, and put up signs. I opened up the doors into both bathrooms. I put a microphone in front of each of the doors, and then I put the speakers in the rooms. And I had a stereo chamber. But it pissed everybody off because I couldn't use the bathroom. But, that was the kind of things that we had to do.
It's almost heartbreaking. It's nice to have so much information, but we're almost saturated with it now.
Oh, yeah.
And what is your advice to young... why was McCoy saying you're the man? What was the nuanced stuff that made you have your own individual sound as it related as an engineer?
Okay. My concept is... There are times when you have to use gizmos. You have to have a phaser and a flanger, and you have to do all this stuff and make it good, because that's the record. But for these kinds of things, my theory was, if you recognize that there's an engineer involved, if you hear what I've done or something, say, oh wow, that's good engineering, then I didn't do my job. If you don't even hear me, I'm not there, all you get is the performance of the artist coming through to you, and you can almost see it, then I've done my job.
I dig it.
So for me, there were several things that made it work. One, I knew music. I was a musician. So what I started doing at Fantasy, I wouldn't hire engineers. Because I came out, when I first started, CBS, RCA, those, you didn't have independent studios. Well, they were union. I remember at CBS, we're union. They got a guy to run the tape recorder, the guy handles the microphone, another guy handles, they had 4 or 5 guys to do everything, and you say, gee, can we do that? Oh no, we can't do that. Well, we did it. Well, we can't do it, because they didn't want to do it. They weren't musicians. They were technical engineers, and they had the keys to the kingdom, and you had to kiss their ass.
Exactly.
And that was it.
Kiss the ring.
And so I was really, really aware of that fact that you got to be inclusive. You got to really listen to what the artist is about and what it's going on, and then you have to. I picked the best microphone for the job. I'll listen and put it where I want it to be. These guys, they put up some microphone and they start turning equalization knobs. Well, you're shifting phase, you're doing all this. I hate. Do you know who George Massenburg?
I don't. Not.
Okay, George Massenburg was a genius, or still is. I hope he's alive. George invented things like the parametric equalizer. He had the most incredible mastering EQ system that I'd ever seen. And he built his own studio. He engineered a group called Earth, Wind, and Fire. You know what I'm saying? So great sound. So he opened the complex out in Santa Monica area or something. Jimmy, you got to come check it out. So I go out there and he says, here's the console. I said, so what's the flow line? He says, it's a wire. Really? Microphone into a preamp into the tape recorder. Bingo. That was it. No, you didn't go through the chain, because every time you went through the chain, you go through an amplifier or something, change the whatever, straight in. That's how I record. I record the right microphone into a great mic preamp and analog to digital and right into the box. And the console is a monitor. There's a picture of me there at the console with Van Morrison.
No, Van is over there. The most recent.
Van and Joey DiFrancesco.
Yeah, Van and Joey.
After 47 years of working with Van, that's the first time I ever had pictures with us. But the console was my monitor, because everything is going into the box. And I haven't run tape in 20 years.
You know, you got the newest Van album with Joey's coming out. Or it already has come out.
Yeah, there's two of them now.
And you know, Van, I've talked to so many guys, the cats that were playing on those studio sessions with him, and he was, by all accounts, obviously a genius. But whether it was Daoud Shaw or Ozzy Allers, he's left us. He's left us. I
talked to him just before he died.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, one of my biggest supporters early on.
Sweetheart, I love him.
But the unpredictability of Van Morrison as it related to the musicians was ridiculous. I mean,
so
I want to hear a story about how you with the band.
Before that, so not this album.
You can take it out. Show
Okay,
the
so this is
even though you don't like the cover art.
Well, I don't know. I've never liked a lot of cover arts. I never know. This is the new one that just came out this week with Joey.
Yeah.
This is the one that came out earlier in the year. This went to number 1 on the jazz charts for 7 weeks. Was in the top 10 for 27. It's been on the charts for 30-something weeks. Went from 21 back up to 16 last week. I don't know what it's going to do. Okay, so after the first one, same thing I did with the second one, actually.
Yeah.
Van doesn't usually come to me. I mix this stuff by myself most of the time. If he comes, I'm really happy, because then I got him there and he can tell me.
Absolutely.
Most of the time, it's, I'll see on the phone, so I send him something and he tells me what he wants. We talk on the phone and I fix what he wants and I do what I want. But so it was all done. I'd mixed everything. I'm getting ready to master, but I made CDs for him and all, but they're gone. So they were playing the San Francisco Jazz Center. He and Joey. And remember, this album was the first time they played together. Ever. And he hadn't even met the band. He didn't even know who the drummer or the sax player or the guitar player were until they got to the studio. Nobody knew what we were doing. We cut 15 tunes in 2 days, no take twos. The second one, we cut 15 tunes in 2 days, no take twos. That's how magical this thing is. Okay, so I'm taking him his CDs to the gig. So, because so I go backstage, and I'm handing the CDs, and we're talking. He said, "What are you doing, Jimmy?" I said, "I'm going to do this other thing." But this guy, he has trouble schmoozing the people. And then I realized who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, I fixed that." I said, "How did you fix that?" He says, "I don't give him time to breathe." And that's how it was. We go out to the tune 1, tune 2, tune 3, 1, 2, 3, right after another. So he gets up to the microphone and he says, "The San Francisco Chronicle says that I can be unpredictable." He says, "I think it's fake news." And he turned around and walked. That was all he said all night long. So
what's the Zen mastery there? The idea of no space to let people start getting their egos involved, or something?
No, because it's getting. I could never put my finger on exactly how to say it until one night he was on the Tonight Show, and I don't know if it was Johnny or Leno or who it was, but they said to him, "You have a reputation of being, curmudgeon, blah, 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 all that stuff." And he says, "Well, I'm an introvert in an extroverted profession." And I suddenly got it. Because he is. We talk a lot on the phone. We hang. I mean, this whole thing started because he gave me a call. "What are you doing?" "Let's have lunch." So we hung out for 3 hours. But when he knows you and when he's, comfortable with you, then he interacts a lot more. But otherwise, it's not that he's standoffish and all. He just isn't comfortable with it. And people want things out of him that, I understand it. They do it for me sometimes too. They want to drag stuff out of you that you just aren't.
Yeah, I respect it. If you're going to be authentic to yourself and to your craft and to the music, then you have to be. If he's introverted, then he's introverted. That's what it is. He's not going to try to be someone he's not.
And when he's animated, he's animated.
Well, a lot of cats were shown the door. They just didn't know day to day.
I've been there.
Tupelo honey, that kind of stuff. They didn't know if they were going to have the gig the next day.
That's right. Well, you never know. You're always in the band. as far as my life has been. I'm always in the band, but I never know. It could be 5 years, then I hadn't heard from him in a while. He calls me up and says, "What are you doing, Jimmy?" I said, "What's going on?" He says, I'm producing John Lee Hooker. And these guys, you got to come do this with me, because I said, okay, I'll come in and do it. And so I got there, and Mike Kappas, his manager, Johnny's manager, said, "Well, we've already done so much. Can we keep the same setup?" I said, "Okay." Van calls, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well," I told him what was happening. He said, No. That's why I called you." I said, "Okay, let's make a record." Yeah. So I said, "Get rid of all those German microphones. Get rid of everybody in the ISO booths. I want everybody in a circle in the room."
I love it.
"How many SM56s do you have?" The kid says, about 20, 25. I said, "Get them all. That's the only microphone I use on everybody. Set them up in a circle so they could face each other." Had everybody, we got, made a couple changes in the band to make everything, and then we cut everything. And that won 2 Grammys. And that was John Lee's last actual live album. The next one was the best of. What a sweetheart. I loved him, man. We really became good friends. I just really enjoyed working with him. But, it's just that kind of thing that the magic comes when people can communicate.
Going back to what you said before about doing your job, when you know you've done your job appropriately, when it kind of just hits you, you articulated it a lot better than I did. But with this new album with Joey and Van, that's the feel that people have been that you get when you hear that. I get the sound the best I can, based on the studio, the instrument, the players, the time, everything. Every time it's different. You get the best sound you can with what it is. You get everybody hearing. They've got to be able to hear one another. They've got to be able to understand what everybody's doing and then feel comfortable with the sound and themselves. When you get that blend happening for everybody, where suddenly there's no complaining like too much bass, not enough this, whatever, they're all comfortable, then it's on them. If it's Woody Herman, if it's McCoy Tyner, if it's Bill Evans, if it's Sonny Rollins
or Joe Henderson or Flora Purim or Johnny Guitar, whatever. I mean, all these different artists, it's on them at that point. My job is to get it so that they can do their thing. Then it's their thing. So what you got when that happens is you got Joey and Van and the guys locking in on a magical flow. And it just flows, and you can't, it's like, I wouldn't let them out of the studio on the first album. They cut like 3 or 4 tunes, and they say, "Oh, let's go in." No, don't stay right there. Next tune, let's go. And because don't stop the magic. Finally, and you hear it on, I left it on there. He says, "We got to hear this stuff." I said, "Okay, come on in." I left that on. And on both of these albums, I did something I never did on 47 years of doing Van Morrison albums. I left his mic open. So you hear him. Yeah. Oh, great. Oh, wow. You hear it, and you hear him. And there's a guitar solo on the new album, and he sings underneath it. He's like kind of like it's in there. You hear all of it.
He's doubling with the voice.
No, he's just enjoying himself.
Yeah, he's having a ball.
We had so much fun on these 2 records. He turned to me, I guess it was on the first one. He said, "Jimmy, this is like the old days." And it was, because we just go in and get going and have fun. And there's none of this ego stuff and none of this, "I'm the producer, I'm the engineer." Okay. It's just like we're all in this little pot together with a nice big soup cooking. And it's magic when you work with magical people.
This is really important, though. A lot of cats don't know this. You told an incredible story about Neil Cassidy, who was Kerouac's buddy on the road. And then obviously he was the bus driver on for the Merry Pranksters.
Yep.
And he had a funeral. And you went down there with your band, because at the time you were starting to get off on original music, playing original tunes, plugging in, and not jazz or anything like that. And you get down there and 10,000 people show up.
Yeah.
And I want you to pick up the story from there.
Okay.
And I want you to talk about
Okay, well, it was a wake for Neil.
It was a wake for Neil Cassidy.
Neil was found belly up on the beach in Mexico.
Right.
I don't remember the details.
No, it's something about electrocuted by...
lots of different stories. I heard 3 or 4 of them, and I don't know. Anyway, he's gone. So the whole Kesey family wanted to have a wake for him at Limekiln Creek down on Highway 1. And so up in there, well, we thought the family, this was Jerry and the Dead and that whole pranksters group of people. So I had been putting together this band. I had been playing rock and roll on top 40 on Broadway in San Francisco behind Naked Ladies, TNA,
Right.
as we call it.
Right, tits and ass.
And I wanted to play this new music that was happening, this FM music that I was hearing now all of a sudden. And so we put a band together and we woodshedded and we wrote some tunes. And Jim's band was going to come out at that event. So we were there for 3-4 days, and there was just lots of psychedelics and stuff and everything.
What year was this, by the way? Well, when did he die? 68, 67?
67.
Yeah.
Would
So
have been
people
67.
were dosing, and you were there the whole week,
I was there for about 4 or 5 days. Yeah.
and you didn't go on until the 5th day.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, I'll be quite honest with you. I took a lot of acid for a lot. I mean, I was a big psychedelic freak.
That's great.
So here I was, ready to play and all. The bass player and the singer and the guitar player freaked out and split. And there's nobody. So Jerry and a couple other guys, I think Bobby Wood, come on, we'll play with you, Jimmy. So we played together at this thing. But we didn't know. We thought the family was a few hundred people. So they had brought, they brought a pig they were going to put in the ground, one, and it was just enough kind of food for everybody in the camp. 10,000 people showed up. We didn't know it had gotten this big. The Hells Angels show up with a truck full of bottles, half gallons of wine. Open the top, drop 2 tabs in, close it, shake it up, pass it out. By Saturday night, the beach was roaring, just roaring with this pulse of kungas and drunk people and no food. And so they put this pig in the ground, and that night was my turn to bring 2 buckets of pig meat back to the camp. Well, just the smell, I couldn't eat anything but yogurt at that point. I was pretty high.
Yeah.
So I'm walking through the crowd. We just you can have the rest of it. We just take, and I felt vibes of cannibalism. I thought they were going to kill me trying to get back to the camp with these 2 buckets of meat. It was crazy. I mean, it was really crazy. The Angels were not the best security force, as witnessed by Altamont.
Altamont as well. Now, this is fat. So Cassidy, but you were part of Hoffman's Bicycle.
Yes, I was.
This is
Danny Healy and I and Richard Tree started that.
Richard Treese.
He was
Rest
the guitar player.
in peace.
Did he
dude.
pass?
Long gone.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And Giannini there was another cat,
Butch. He took my place when I left the band.
Okay, but I want to know at that time. Explain how that came. How did you meet Healy and Treese?
I was jamming downstairs at 610 Ashbury.
710.
710 Ashbury. The
Dead House.
The Grateful Dead House. And I was hanging out, and my old lady was upstairs on the nitrous oxide bottle.
Right.
And somebody came and said, we can't get Nancy off the bottle. So I go up there and I grab the hose and put a foot on her chest and just kicked her off the hose, And so I went down to start playing, and I think it was Danny was there, and he was becoming a bass player at the time.
Absolutely.
So I got a call from Bobby Weir. The first the Dead took over the Carousel Ballroom. So they decided to have a Tuesday night jam session. And I won't get into my relationship with Mickey Hart, but Mickey calls me up and says, you got to come in here, you're going to hear what's going on. And so we went up there, and unfortunately it was really uncomfortable. Here's the stage, and there's the audience. Stage left, they had cordoned off a little area with 2 seats, like the king and queen are going to sit there in a box. And they put us, I said, Nancy, we can't sit there with all these people around. Who are these guys? It's like, oh God. So we sit there. Well, Mickey, there was Jerry, Yorma, and Jack Cassidy in front of Jack's amp, and they're playing, and Mickey gets up and he's playing rudiments on the stand-up drum.
Right, yeah.
They're throwing things at him, and Jerry goes over and he goes, like this, and no, I'm not doing that, and I left. So Bobby called me the next week. He says, hey, you want to be the drummer for the second Tuesday night? So I said, yeah. So I came up, and Danny was the bass player. Richard Treese was a guitar player. Al Rose played B3 organ. Do you know who Al was?
Oh, that's a name I don't know.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened to Al. I haven't seen. And then there was Tom.
Fogerty?
No. Tom, not Winston. Tom. Can't remember his last name. Who was the guitar player in the band I had that fell apart?
Was he one of the cats that freaked out?
Yeah.
He got a reprieve.
So we get there, and he's dosing with a little tab. He said, come here. I said, no, I think I need to be straight for this. I'm not going to. Right. Oh man, how can you do it? Well, he got so high he couldn't play. But we were all straight. We had a great time, and we played, and that's how it met. Then we decided to really put a band together from it, and we got a singer who wrote some songs, and so that became Hoffman's Bicycle.
Unbelievable.
And then we changed the name to Bicycle, Bycycle.
Well, yeah, but I've done a lot of vetting about. Mickey really was more of an accent percussionist. He wasn't really a timekeeper.
No, that's true. It
is what it is. The point is that they were harassing him at the carousel, and then. But again, I just want you to go back to this time when, because that even though your band fell apart at Cassidy's wake,
mm-hmm.
I think you were energized at that time to go in a different direction musically. You said it spurred you in a different direction. Organic creation. Can you talk about...
I wanted to do studio work. I wanted to play in the studios. I really wanted to, but I didn't have the chops and the discipline yet. So my old lady at the time, she said, listen, I'll get a job if you'll practice. And it took a while to talk me into that because I didn't feel comfortable with that. But she said, come on. So she got a job, and I practiced 8 to 12 hours a day. And I pulled the books out, and I sat there with the metronome and the books for probably 9 months to almost a year. And one day, Jerry called me up. He says, hey, you want a session? I said, chicken have lips? What are you talking about? So I went down to Pacific Recording in San Mateo. It was Jerry Gorman. I can't think of his first name. Was the bass player.
Steve Gorman? Or
no, can't remember.
Anybody in the audience that can help out would be great.
Yeah, we'd like to know that.
Yeah,
and Banana from the Youngbloods, and me on drums. And it was...
Lowell Levenger, Banana.
Yeah.
Jerry, Gorman.
And me.
And you.
And it was...
Who was engineering?
I don't know.
Healy, maybe.
No. It was probably Paul Curcio, who owned the studio at the time. And so we were playing on demos. Brian Rohan and Mike Stepanian were the drug attorneys from San Francisco.
Dig.
So they were putting money up to do demos for these people to try and get something going and whatever it was. And we did a demo for this guy named John Dawson. Marmaduke. He changed his name to Marmaduke. The tune was called Superman. David Nelson said that the version I played on came out on a record somewhere. I don't have it.
Well, we need to find that immediately. That is unbelievable.
I keep forgetting to go check that out. So we played on that's how I got into studio work, was that. And then I ended up doing, Bob Sarempa was a vice president at Mercury. And somebody told him about me, and I got a call, and I went and I started doing sessions for him at Mercury at the studios. And do
you remember what you were? Because then this is not. Healy was doing Doug Somm, and what Mercury?
Maybe Healy got me into that because Doug Somm was in the other room when we were doing Sarempa stuff. So it might have been Healy that got me into that.
That's unbelievable.
And that's where I met George Rains. Do you know who George Rains is?
Is he still with us?
I don't know. He's Marcia Ball's drummer now, as far as I know.
Oh my God.
George plays like this. So if it's on the left, he plays it with the left hand. If it's on the right, he plays it with... He never crosses. He never plays hi-hat against snare. He always plays hi-hats. He just... Great drummer. He played with all those Texas guys,
The question is this. You, like Montreux.
Yeah.
Okay. I've done 3 interviews with M. Tume, the percussionist.
Oh,
okay?
Leon Chancellor...
Well, no, that's Ndugu's past. He's the drummer.
Yeah.
And Tume was the percussionist, Jimmy Heath's son. But the point is, David Lee played drums on those.
Oh, okay.
All right. And and you were there recording it live.
Okay.
Because that's true. 74. Sonny Rollins, The Cutting Edge.
I did that.
You got that album.
Well, what happened was 73. We had a fantasy, all of our labels night or day or whatever it was at Montreux. So they brought it back for me to mix it.
So you weren't there actually running the board. You got the end result. What it was
I got
done.
the tapes, the multi-tracks. So the drum sound is like in another room.
Right.
And I can't get anything. So I asked the art department, you got pictures? Yeah, they sent me pictures. Well, here's the drums. The mics were like 20 feet in the air. No wonder I can't get a drum sound. They're above the band. And it was because what it was the Swiss closed circuit TV had control of everything. And they just sent a feed over to a tape recorder, and that's what we got. And the sound was
muddy.
Terrible. Oh, it was horrible. I spent so much time trying to mix that thing, trying to cut out all the feedback from the PA system, little teeny pieces I could cut out because you can't remove it from the middle of a song. So they said, you're coming to do 74. So I went in to do 74, and I walked in, And they didn't like that an American was brought in. And I lost all respect for the Swiss at that moment. They started ripping me off.
Hold on, you actually traveled over there
with Orrin Keepnews. Orrin and I. Orrin was.
By the way, just for the record, Merle Saunders Jr. is tuning in. He first met Orrin when he was a businessman for Riverside and those guys.
He owned Riverside.
He did, but I mean, this was prior to him before you ever came on the scene with Fantasy, before they purchased all the prestige stuff and things like that. So Orrin takes you over there.
No, Orrin comes as the producer. He was producing all the acts, and I was the engineer. We did a lot of work together like that. We did a bunch of McCoy albums that way and all. So I walk in, and I had a little tape. I said, well, put this on. Let me hear what it sounds like in here. And first thing I said is, the speakers are out of phase. How do you know that? I said, I can hear it. They're out of phase. They're not out of phase. So I said, just a minute. And I walked behind, and one looks like this, and one looks like that. One looks like this, I said, look at this. He goes, how could that have happened? I said, oh, bullshit, So we get going. They turn off they were pissed off because I said, look, I select the microphones. I put them where I want. You take a feed from me. Because we're making records. These guys, their living is based on these things, and you're just wanking it here in your little closed circuit thing. Right. They were furious. They would not go with it. So it comes down to the union, and the union said, well, they have to do it. I said, then we're gone. We're closing it down. We're not going to do this. Okay, everybody, we're dead. No, you can't do that. I said, okay, and the guy says, do what he wants. So they were pissed because they had to do what I wanted. So I got a picture of me at the console. And here I am at the console, and the LEDs are all sitting there just under the red, just into the yellow. And here's a picture of Stanley Cowell on the monitor. They shut the monitor off. Now I can't see. I'm upstairs, and the console's facing here, and the window down to the stage is over there where the tape recorder is. So Orrin has to run there. They ran out. They left. Goodbye. And they walked out. Got nobody. I had to figure out everything. So Orrin's running the tape recorder, and he's telling me what's going on the stage while I'm running the thing. So I get back to Fantasy, and everything was sitting right there. They had detoned the tape recorder 20 dB. So all the levels were down in the noise. They just tried to screw me one way and the other. I was absolutely furious. Absolutely just could not believe they could be so unprofessional and so nasty and petty. And but I mean, those were good records.
That album sounds.
It took a lot of work.
What was your philosophy about mic? Like Glyn Johns used to do an overhead, left overhead and a right overhead mic, and maybe one mic on the bass drum. And to me, there was some leakage, but it allowed for the music to breathe.
Yes.
And nowadays, you can mic every piece of a drum kit, and I just feel like Stern does not do that.
You're wrong.
You do mic it.
I do mic it. I mic everything, and then I have overheads. And I blend it.
Explain to me. Well, because to me it sounds like there's too much language.
Well, I'm a drummer.
I dig.
I know what drums should sound like. When I first started making records, I screwed them up because I thought the drums.
I don't know if you screwed them up though. What did you screw up?
Well, I put the drums out here, and they shouldn't really be there. The perspective should be. You listen to the band. The drums are in the right perspective. But if it's back here, and I don't have the presence on the floor tom, for example, you can hear it, but I need that stick sound. So I'll bring that little mic in a little bit. I'll bring these in to enhance the overhead so that you hear the overhead sound and the breathing, but you can also hear some of the specificity of the different sounds. And I will mic the front and the back of the bass drum, and sometimes the top and the bottom of the snare. Because I don't use all that all the time. I use but if I need it and it isn't there, I'm screwed. If I have it and I don't need to use it, that's fine. So I will have like 10 or 12 tracks on drums, but you won't notice it that way because I'll make it sound like I use. Back in the day, we had, a stereo mic here or two mics here, and we put something down, and that was it. We only had one track for drums. When I started, it was mono. We got 2 tracks. It was binaural. Then 3 tracks, and then 4, and then it went 8, 6. Now you got 175 million tracks. I get a call from a friend. I shouldn't have done it, but I said, okay, I'll mix your thing for you. I bring it up. There's 40-something guitar solos. I said, well, which one do you want? Well, I don't know. You choose. I'm not going to listen to 40 guitar solos. It's not my job. What one do you want? I don't know. So I had to go through and kind of pick one and go. Well, why? Because they don't have to decide right away. They can put it. Let's put it on the track and we'll decide later. Will you figure it out now. Make it clean. First of all, okay, so give me an example.
Yeah.
Van would cut a tune back in
Van
the day.
Morrison.
Van Morrison would cut a tune back in the day. I'm in the control room, maybe an assistant, that's it. And Van's out there. He doesn't turn to anybody else. He didn't turn to Joey and say, what do you think? He turns to me. We have this communication. So I remember, I don't remember which album it was, but it was one of the Beautiful Vision, one of those. And I said, it wasn't a good track. And his performance, the track was okay, but his performance wasn't that good.
No, I know what you're going to say. You can say, I can fix the band. I can't fix Van.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
And so what I said was, let's do another one, okay? Erase that. And I said, erase it, go over it. I don't want that sitting there. They're going to bring that out after he's retired or whatever, and it's going to be, well, that wasn't very... Don't leave that crap in there. I left good ones in there that we didn't use. And on every tune, every album I've ever done with him, there's tunes left over. There's one tune left over on each of these two albums because we just had too much stuff, And I said, well, why did we cut this? Everybody's cut it. You really do. Let's cut one of your tunes. And so we put Corinna in the shelf. Those are the things that, I'd rather bring out his music.
Yeah, absolutely.
He writes such great songs, and he's got such a magical connection to it all. And I love his music. I'm a big fan. And most of the artists I work with, I'm a big fan. And so I want to make them shine.
I dig.
I want them to be really good. You don't have to notice me here. I want them to be really good because I love it. And I will find a little, I'll fix that. But I don't overall fix everything, you got to play it right. But I can fix a little notes a little out. I can fix that. I can cut the time a little, whatever it is. We did, on the first album, we had one tune where we stopped because they screwed up. I said, go back, pick it up at the bridge, I'll cut it. So we went back, picked it up, and then I cut it together. And the second half was a little bit faster. Pro Tools, I love you. Slowed it right down, but that's all I had to do.
Healy used to talk about a lot of those guys, Owsley, or they would be building the wall of sound on acid. I mean, did you wind up doing a lot of building echo chambers? Did you do a lot of work on acid?
I did everything.
And
back in the day, I stopped in '69. I've had nothing since '69.
Sure, but I'm saying how did it lend itself to creativity and problem solving? I'm just curious about the expanded consciousness there.
I think it helped the flow. I went back and got some graduate work in electronics because my degree's in electronics. I took my finals on acid. I took my
finals on acid.
I took my college finals on acid.
Were they experiential finals or they were multiple choice?
How about calculus, physics, microprocessor? I got straight A's. I got 100%. I was relaxed. I'm cool. I'm feeling great. I know. I've studied. I've done it. I know the stuff. Why get emotionally tightened up so you screw up? Just flow. If you either know the answer or you don't. And if you've studied and worked at it, you know the answer. Bing, bang. I took my post-grad finals. I went in for my microprocessor finals. I was the first one done. I was done in 10 minutes. While the rest of them were on question number 2, I was on the golf course.
If people want to come see you play, can you talk about where you play now?
Well, I haven't been known as a drummer for many years.
I know, but we're not. But that's all under the bridge.
Well, now I'm starting to play more, and I'm getting some gigs. And so right now, I don't have an out gig that I'm playing right now. Friday night was the last one I have. But several people were saying, "Hey, we're going to get some stuff. Are you available?" I said, "Yeah." So the word is starting to get out now that I'm playing and that I can play. And so I'm starting to get some gigs. And I can't say specifically right now because I don't have a gig lined up. I have a couple of recording gigs lined up, but people can't come and see me do that. So
the jam on Monday nights is just a jam.
I book the rhythm section. A friend of mine books the horn section. And we get anywhere from 6 to 10 guys. And we just pull out the books. And we pull out, if somebody has a chart they want or that they wrote, or we just pull out the fake books and we call a tune and go. If we can't play it, we stop and let's try something else. Usually that doesn't happen too often. These guys are really good players, all of them. So we just play and have a good time. We play for 2 hours every Monday night. I bring a bottle of wine. So 10 guys, 1 bottle of wine, you're not going to get drunk. And that's it. We don't have an audience. We don't do gigs. Because it's free. you can do whatever you want. If you screw up, it's okay. We don't care. There's nobody to. One day, one of the guys brought in his girlfriend, and she was a pretty nice looking lady. So I could feel myself. I could feel the chair suck up into my butt. You know, and everybody's saying, you know, you just tighten right up because you're performing for somebody. We're not performing. We're just playing for ourselves, and it's a wonderful space. It really is. Before
I let you go, I couldn't ask anybody better. The legacy of Fantasy Studios. When I interviewed George Duke, he said it was it was a place you wanted to go to meet other people because you never knew who was going to be there.
That's right.
And do you think that Fantasy was responsible for increasing musical vocabulary in our lexicon?
I think so. Because one of the things that we did was, at the time I wanted more live acts, but we bought all these catalogs. We brought Riverside, Milestone, Prestige, Stax, Volt, all these things, and we revived that music, and we signed new people under those labels.
That's
too.
Right.
So, you know, that brought a lot of it, and we put all that stuff together into one place where you could go and find it all. Concord now has it. I don't know what they're doing with it all, but you know, so from that standpoint, yeah, I think it was a very powerful factor. And the other thing was that we were L.A., New York, Chicago, Nashville had record company recording studios, you know, the big, and we were the only one in the Bay Area. There were some independent, there was Hiders, and there was some other stuff, but the record plant and all. But as a complex and a complete system, a record company with everything, we were the only one. And we had, at the time, I believe, the best studios around. And so by signing all these people, and if they were in town, like Woody would come to town, he'd suddenly be in my office, you know. I went in the office one day, and here's Dick LaPalm and Jordy Hormel and all those guys from LA. They're hanging out in the office. Kent Duncan, who owned Kendon Recorders in LA, after I left Fantasy, he bugged me to come down and run it down there. And I said, well, you know, he says, look at Jim, you're the club. You're the clubhouse. Just be the clubhouse here. So he gave me his office. It was a huge office. Just had, you know, rock wall, waterfall.
What year is this?
78, 79.
All right, so Fantasy moved down to LA.
79, I guess. Yeah. No. This was I'd left Fantasy.
What
This was Kendon Artisan. Kendon in Burbank, Artisan in Hollywood.
Wow.
And it was either Kendon or the record plant was #1 in LA at the time. So we were always fighting back and forth. And so I put in a bar, well-stocked bar, and you know these drawers in your desk that have, for the files, you know, all that?
Sure.
Full of cigars. The other doors are locked, but that drawer is full of cigars. And I'd walk into the office, and here'd be 3 or 4 producers. They don't have a gig at the studio. They're hanging out in Jim's office. They're smoking my cigars and drinking my scotch or whatever. That's what it was about. And it was fine. I had no problem with it, you know. Go, enjoy. That was what, because that way, when they got a project, they want to come to the studio and work at our studio. So that was kind of what happened. And then I had my fill of LA, and I just finally left. But
total shaman, engineer, and just cut Van's album. It's coming out tomorrow on the jazz.
No, it's out now. It just came
no,
out.
I mean on the jazz charts.
On the jazz, well, the jazz charts come out tomorrow. The Billboard charts come out tomorrow. So I'm going to look and see if it's on there. The last time it dropped at #1. It dropped at 13 on the pop charts. The first one, 13 on the pop charts and 1 on the jazz charts, and it stayed #1 for 7 weeks. It stayed in the top 10 for 27 weeks. It's still on the charts. It was 21 the week before. Last week it was 16 with a bullet going back up. So I'm curious to see if this one will bump that one back up more, and I hope this one comes on. It's a better album, I think, but they're really both great. And the first one, as I was telling you, NPR reviewed it and said it's spectacular. It's the best album he's done in 50 years. They compared it to Astro Weeks in terms of feeling and such, because it's not a studio album in such that, you know, okay, you know, overdub, do the thing. It's a live album. Everything you hear, it's all live. Take one. You can hear the magic between them, and that's the gig.
You were done in one day?
2 days. 2 days to do 15 tunes.
2 days, 15 tunes, so it was like 3-hour sessions each time or something?
A little more than that, because we did the horn player, the sax player, Troy Monster. He did the background horn parts.
I thought Van played sax.
Van played alto.
Van used to show up with Steve Mitchell and Haggerty and play once in a while at San Anselmo.
He used to show up at, I had in Fairfax at the Sleeping Lady, it was Jim Stern and Friends night on Friday nights. He came and sat in, Bill Champlin came and sat in.
Oh.
Who else? I think there was a whole bunch
Boz
of people would come and sit in, and it was just, those were the days. That was in the 70s, in the early 70s into the mid 70s.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to tell the Rudy Van Gelder story from the Palmieri sessions.
Okay, so it's a Cal Tjader
It's
album.
1974 El Primo was the name of the album. Yeah.
It was a Cal Tjader album, and I had produced a bunch of Cal's albums and engineered a bunch of them live and all over the place. So we go back to New York to cut the album with Eddie Palmieri, Charlie Palmieri, Tito Puentes, and Cal, and it was at Rudy Van Gelder's studio. Well, Rudy was very protective of everything. There's only a couple of secrets, and he knew that, and he didn't want to give anybody. So every microphone had a windscreen on it. You couldn't tell what microphone it was. He ripped the label off of everything he had. He had Koss Red Devil headphones, ripped the label off. He had a Neve console, took the Neve off everywhere. Ampex tape, took the Ampex off. You couldn't tell what anything was. So if somebody said to the musician, "What microphone did you use?" "I don't know." I couldn't tell. So he was really secretive about all that stuff. If he knew I was an engineer, he would never have let me in the door. Period.
Right.
Done.
Cal said you were just a co-producer.
So Cal said he's my producer, Jim Stern. That's all he knew, was I was a producer. So I got to hang out and in the control room and all, and be involved in the music, but I didn't touch anything, and he didn't. And I'm like, oh wow, what a big console! Look at all those knobs. I had to play the part, because if he got any wind that I knew what I was doing, he'd have thrown me out of there. And so we're cutting this thing. We're getting ready for the session. In come the horn players. Now this is Garcia, all these. In come Schwartz, Goldberg, Feinberg. What's with the Jewish horn section? Those are the only guys in New York can feel the music.
That's right. Barry Rogers, great trombone.
I couldn't believe it. Here's this whole Latin date with a Jewish horn section, and boy, they really got the music. They cooked. That was fun. That was really great.
When you brought it back, though, there was.
I didn't bring it back.
No, but the music, you said it was all. He had it mixed a certain way where you had it.
Oh yeah. Well, that was when we bought Prestige. He had cut a lot of the Prestige stuff.
Right.
So when we bought the catalog, we had to recut all the parts for the pressing plant so they could press new albums, because
reissues.
None of that stuff existed. It was
right.
a different pressing plant, so we have to do it over. So we put the album on, we put the tape on, and the album is, bong bong gong gong ging ging gong gong, and then we go to the tape. What's going on? He was so paranoid that there's a curve. The Radio Institute of America, the RIAA, has a curve that boosts the highs when you cut the disc, and then when you play the disc back through the RIAA, it's built into your receiver. It does the opposite. It brings the highs back down, but that brings the noise down with it. So it sounds normal, but it's quieter. So that was why the RIAA curve was put in. Well, he put his own curve in. It's like this. And he would mix binaural, left and right. And then he built a thing we call a compatibilizer that would bring it towards the center. So we spent 6 months going through trying to get that. We had parametric equalizers and graphic equalizers, trying to figure out what his curve was. Finally, when we figured out, we got it sounding just like the disc, and we figured out what his curve was, we built a filter for that. Then we had to build compatibilizers. We built like 4 compatibilizers, trying to figure out where the right place was to get it to where he had it. We finally got it. So we had a filter and a compatibilizer we had to run through before we could cut the discs, to cut the whole catalog. So we were able to cut the whole, because he wanted you to bring it back to him. He was the only one that could cut it, because he knew what he had done, and we weren't about to do that, so we had to figure it out. God bless him. He made some wonderful records. I loved his sound. I know why the paranoia was there. I mean, let's face it, if he'd have told everybody what he's doing, he probably wouldn't have gotten all the work he did.
That's right, and there were quite a few cats that were on junk going up there too, and so he had to really be careful. It was his own home.
It was, and later when he was over in Inglewood Cliffs, he lived upstairs.
Right.
And he had a two-way mirror to the bathroom, not because he was kinky, but he wanted to make sure that those guys weren't shooting up, because he'd throw you out. If he found needles and stuff, he'd throw you out. And I did the same thing. I got really upset at a couple. I won't mention who.
No.
But there were a couple of big name people who some of the players were, there was a particular smack dealer from the city. He walked in my studio one day and I threw him out. I said, "Get out of here, man."
Talking about Berkeley.
Yeah, I said, "Get out of here. Don't you ever come by my studios again." Because the guy that cleans up the place, the janitor guy came in and found needles in the bathroom and all. And I said, "That's the end of that, man. Can't be having that."
Jim Stern, such an honor to connect with you, brother. I can't wait to do it again, man.
Well, it's such an honor to connect, but to meet you and we've done this on the phone a few times, but just to be here in my place and doing it and just hanging out with you for a while. I mean, you're such a fount of knowledge. And I'll tell you one thing, man. I have been interviewed. Pardon me. I'm 74.
Yeah.
I'll be 75 in 6 months. I've been making records for 50 years. I've been interviewed by Billboard and this one and that one and you name it, and on this and interviews with him, blah blah blah. Nobody that's ever interviewed me has done the homework that you did. You brought up names, especially the first time. You brought up, I said, how did you know that? I mean, I had forgotten that completely, and I just like, oh, that's so obscure. And I just want to tell you how appreciative I am of the fact that you really take your work seriously enough to be able to ask really specific and engendering questions that draw stuff out of us. I've never known anybody like you. I think it's great.
Well, thank you for that. It's a sacred journey, and thankfully I don't have anybody over me telling me what questions I need to ask, and therefore I can go in and really do the research, but most importantly just feel, and just get into a conversation. Next thing you know, we do stuff like this, and people were inspired, so it was great to hang, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jake.
Much love. We'll see you soon. This is the Jake Feinberg Show.
Listen to the music.